This week on Roleplay Geeks, the gang discusses our experiences using Roll20 online while exploring my dark and disturbing Call of Cthulhu campaign, and we learn what happened when Jimmy walked in on his son Jack. All that and more on episode 10, At the Mountains of Madness and Mediocrity with Roll20.
Okay, in this week's episode of Roleplay Geeks, we're going to talk a little bit about an experience that we've all been having for about, 2 or 3 weeks now, I think, of using Roll20 to run a game. So just to give a little bit of a backdrop of what's been going on, Steve Hill has been running a Call of Cthulhu game, which we're all relatively new to Call of Cthulhu. We haven't done it a whole lot. So there's a new system for us that we're trying to learn. It's the 7th edition that we're using. And we're using Roll20. And the reason we're using Roll20 is because, obviously, in this stressful time, we can't all get together and play. But even if it wasn't that situation, Steve Hill is actually fairly distant away from us, spatially speaking. He's about 3.5 hours or so. So it's easier for us to all to get together and using this online platform to play. One of the nice things about Roll20, if you're not familiar with it, is that it's a free tool that you can use. It has video and audio built in. It has a sort of a board you can work with. It's got a dice roller. It's got a lot of functions. We're going to talk a little bit about our experience with Roll20 and what we like, what we don't like, what we'd like to see in a similar product in the future. So let's not get too much into the Call of Cthulhu part of things because that's a whole different podcast. But I'm going to go ahead and kick off by saying that I have actually been really enjoying playing, and I've really enjoyed the latitude to be able to play with particularly somebody like Steve Hill that I haven't got to play with a lot in the last few years using this technology. So on the offset, just start with a positive note. I think that this capability is amazing. What do you guys think?
I think Steve is still killing me. He's killing me in every game.
That has nothing to do with Roll20.
Well, other than the fact, at least it allows you to be consistent.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess, as the GM, I mean, this is a brand new tool for me. There's still some features that I haven't fully encompassed, but it just offers so many fantastic tools. I made a column of likes and dislikes, and really the cons are very, very few. I mean, again, like you said, Frank, it's a fantastic gathering place for all of us to get together. I think the communication's relatively good, and we're running a relatively large group. I mean, for me, I've got 5 players, so that can be hard enough to control or, keep everyone engaged all the way across a table when we're all sitting in the same room. But it seems to be going quite well. Everyone seems relatively engaged in the game. Maybe in some ways it's easier, I don't know, to keep everyone involved. In case listeners don't know, it has a small little video screen at the very bottom where we all have a video feed as well as audio, and a large board in which I can draw maps real quickly. We can all add to them. Somebody can point out and say, hey, I'm on this side of the building, or I can pre-set up several pages with maps or handouts and just reveal them as we go along in the adventure. If I do a map, I can reveal portions of the map as we go along, and I'm not sure what that looks like on your side exactly. I mean, all I see is kind of an opaque, and I'm assuming what it looks like is it's all dark until I reveal a little part of the map. But
it's a fairly standard, Fog of War, if you're familiar with any sort of role-playing or strategy game from a video game. It's like that. Mm-hmm. There's little edges. You can see around the edges of whatever it is, your sight line.
And, as a game master, you have total control over what the player sees, doesn't see. And it was super easy to get started. I went through the tutorial. You can create handouts. I know for all of you characters all have separate backstories in this game. So I created journal entries for each one of you that all of you don't share, and that's a neat thing too, being able to share information or pictures or something like that each of you can have individually. You can share it with the group or not, and it just really enhances the role-playing aspect of it. I think I really can't imagine anything much better than what they've set up for that.
Yep.
So let's go to other opinions. John? What do you think of it overall? Just overall.
Overall, I've actually been pretty impressed with it. Going into it, I had the opinion that this is going to suck. I'm not going to like it, or it's going to be just barely passable. Because we tried using it about 4 years ago, maybe something like that. Was it?
A while. It's been a spell.
Yeah, it's been a spell.
There you go.
I remember going ahead and when we tried it, I wasn't very impressed. Now, part of it was I didn't go through the tutorial. We were trying to get up and running like immediately, so I didn't get to play with it alone after that. Overall, I was not impressed when I first started with it, and I don't think it's an issue with it. It was just something new, and I think we were all very new with it and had no idea what the heck we were doing. I think it was Jamie that was actually doing this stuff, wasn't it? It just seemed like it was not going to work, and so when we started this, I'm like, well, at least we can play, what the heck. But actually, that's been very good. I've been really impressed with how well things have worked, especially as I've gotten better in using it. I feel more comfortable with it. I feel like I can more fluidly make the changes I need to, either in the interface or get around. I know what the little beep might be for, there's a message came in or someone rolled or whatever. And so that has improved a lot. So I think a lot of it's just been my own, ability to use it has improved to the point that I think it's really well done. I mean, it could be better. Like, my impression is with the Fog of War, I mean, just seeing it from a player standpoint, I don't know if it's just because Steve Hill hasn't been using it very long, and so there's that issue of him not knowing how to do it very well, but it seems a little convoluted for him to open up an area for us to see.
Well, I have a little something to say about that, but let's get everybody else's opinions first.
Okay. But that's it. I mean, pretty much I've been very impressed with it.
Steven, what's your thoughts on it, broadly speaking?
Sorry, I was waiting for footsteps to stop.
Somebody's on top.
Sounds like you're living Call of Cthulhu.
It is. That's true. I can't speak while they walk. I guess because I've done the remote gaming.
The walkers.
Don't blink.
They forget, but I always remember. So, because I've had experience doing this in other ways, I'm not impressed, really, with the experience. I think it does the bare minimum of what I would expect a product like this to be able to accomplish. I know that it's a small team of guys who've been working on this for years, and that's amazing. And they've, kept up with and updated and continue to refine a product that is useful and fills a need. But the problem I have with it is that the interface is awful. And that's a harsh thing to say, but when I look at user interfaces for things, I'm looking at it very critically, and I can't help it, but I do it for any application that I use. And most of the times, the people who make these things are not user interface people.
Okay, so let me just interject with here.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So
go ahead.
broadly speaking, you would say that you've not been super impressed with the Roll20 experience as a whole.
No.
Okay. And
no,
James,
I'm thankful. I'm thankful, and it's a way to an end, but
it's better than nothing. But
right.
Okay. So James, you didn't really talk about broadly your experience.
I think I'm the only one here who has the advantage of having been a game master and using it, and a player. So as a player, I freaking hate it. Because having been the game master, I have control over everything, and with the player, you're constrained on the things you can do, particularly if the game master doesn't give you control. Now, with me, it's probably a good idea you don't give me a lot of control, because I tend to be a bit mischievous. But from the game master side of things, Steve's still learning how to use the software, and he doesn't use it the same way I would. So there's a lot of things I would do differently in terms of telling the story. For example, you have different pages that you can create. And just think about pages as a way to tell the story. And it would be, I look at it as like the chapter headings. And now he does some things that I do that I don't see a lot of other people do, which is to have snapshots that he'll show on his pages. And it'll show you like a forest setting, which we did last time. That would be like the image you see at the beginning of a chapter before you started playing. And then maybe there will be like another scene where he shows you an artist colony. Now, you can show that in the journal or you can show it in a page. I would not use the journal as much. I would use the pages more to show that stuff. The journal's a good way to do it, though, if you want to split it up between show some players some things and other players leave them out of it. So that's a good thing. The dynamic lighting, because we don't pay for it, that's another feature which I think would really enhance the game a lot. And I've used that before. I love it. So we went through a cave system, and if you had the dynamic lighting set up, you would be able to go through the cave system and assign your tokens that represent your characters different lighting criteria. So one person might have a really bright flashlight and one might have a really dim flashlight. And as their tokens move through the map, it only lights up the areas that their light would be able to light up. And then if you had some ambient light that in certain sections of the cave system, there was lighting in it. And you could set those stuff up as the game master, and it would light certain sections. And for Call of Cthulhu, that would be a really awesome feature to implement because it gives them more of a spooky factor, particularly if you layer music on top of that. So I've used that a lot, and I like that feature. I think Steve Marr is right, though. The interface sucks.
Well, okay, so broadly speaking,
it's a mixture of some of it's good, some of it's bad. As a whole, I'm glad we have a tool we can use to do this stuff.
Okay, so I think we can all agree that as a mechanism that allow us to do this, this is a lot better than 10 years ago, or much less 20 years ago, where it would have been over the phone or something ridiculous like that. The fact that we have some mechanism to engage in role-playing, even though we're all physically separated, is pretty cool, I think.
I mean, it's better than trying to use Skype or Discord. I mean, where you virtually have zero tools. I mean, it still feels like we have a central place that we're meeting and we can show each other what we're doing. But now, I'm glad you mentioned about the cave and not using the cave. And that's actually been a conscious choice for my part. So most of our adventure, we've probably played 6 or 7 times now, have not been dungeon crawls. And so just to explain to everyone, if you've never used Roll20, you can take virtually any piece of artwork and make it a map. If someone has drawn, you can scan a map out of an old module and literally turn it into a map that you can use in Roll20. So it's really neat for that. So when we were getting ready to do one section that was in some tunnels under the city, I specifically went online and looked for just some maps, off any adventure to create some tunnels. But I will say this, I'm not a big fan, and you guys know this, I've never used miniatures, and when we're talking about sitting down at a table to play, I'm really more interested in, using your imagination. Found that when we were doing that, I found that you guys were more interested in what the cave looked like on the map and moving your tokens around than you were in the story that was going on. I mean, it was kind of an experiment on my part. So now that you're in the woodland part, it's been more of a traditional role-playing game in which you don't have a lot of visuals. I want you guys to think about it in your mind more so than look at a map on the screen. So, and two, it creates, I have a finite amount of time to create an adventure. So it's like, do I spend more time on the writing of the story, or do I spend more time, screwing around and creating, to me, what looks like a computer game, a top-down computer game? So, I would rather us spend time traditionally role-playing than playing around with a map. So, and, pushing tokens around. And it's something, because if we're talking about combat or something, we can use that map board that we can all like, poke on or draw on and say, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And that's good enough to understand combat and those sort of things. So, that's, I will say that I did it different ways purposefully. And I found you guys are actually more engaged in the story if I don't have strong visuals on the screen.
Well, you may think that, but
I felt that way. Well, you haven't seemed particularly engaged anyway. So.
Ouch.
Ow!
Ouch. Ouch.
That's engagement for Steve, actually.
That's ouch.
Even when he's sitting at the table, he's kind of looks disengaged. So that's just normal.
Yeah, I'm always off, and that's not an indication of anything that anybody's doing wrong in a game group. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful at all, but the having to deal with miniatures and a map and things like that, especially when there's combat involved, that helps me focus in on the environment more. So for me, it does not distract from the storytelling. It allows me to get more into that particular moment. Now for, the rest of it, sure, the storytelling part is fine, but I've really come over the past few decades to appreciate miniature use, depending on the situation.
I had a problem with the last time we played. What was that? Was that last night? Night before last. I think John did too. I think we all did. Where we were in the forest and we had to go off track from the main trail we were on, and Steve-O described the direction we were going and the character. Anyway, long story short, we need to figure out what we were going to do next. And I wanted to do something based on how I understood the situation, which direction to go, left or right, up or down. And we just got all backwards on it, and we didn't have a map for that. And in those kinds of cases, yeah. It was very frustrating. Where if you just had a simple map, this is where you are, this is where the trail is, and we drew it, so that solved the problem. But definitely like the map.
So let's take a step back for a second, though, because what we're talking about here really isn't a problem with Roll20 per se. It is if we were sitting around a table, I'm not sure that would have changed, would it?
Oh yeah, it definitely would have changed, because when I had to draw the map, I had to use Roll20's map tools. And they suck.
No, what I'm saying is that...
No, but he's saying if you totally didn't understand what I'm trying to describe to you, that could have happened sitting around a table or using the
True,
software.
But the solution...
That was immaterial to
right,
Roll20.
But the solution would have been different. Around a table...
So the implementation would have been probably identical. It would have been, in this particular case, if we were using it at my house, it would have been a whiteboard. And were to grab a couple markers and gone to town. So the criticism that you've got, if I'm trying to summarize this, tell me if I'm wrong, is that the tools suck, which gets to Steve's, user interface critiques, which I think are very valid. I think we should go into deep here in a minute on that. But what the tricky bit here is a role play style. And again, I don't know that Roll20 is the impediment or the leverage, positive or negative here, because again, Steve wouldn't have done that if we were all sitting in a room. He would not have said, "Well, here's a piece of paper with the map on it." He would have just described it, and then we would have had the same confusion, and then grab something, a piece of paper and a pencil, and gone to town. And that's how we would have done it. So I'm not sure that is the... Feel free to disagree, but I don't think that the Roll20 is the problem in that particular with that particular source of problem.
The source, no. The solution, yes.
The source, no. The solution. Well, okay. So one of the problems with doing anything online, whether it's chat, voice, or video, is that it is different than communicating in person. So if we were around the table, Steve might not feel that I am as distant from the game as he feels on this, because I've had things come up where, I was filling out stuff for, I a resume opportunity that came in, and I had to do that while we played, and that was like 50 minutes. And so I'm distracted by that or something else. So when you're distant like this and you're on the screen, it is harder, even though you are communicating by voice and you can see people, it is harder to get all of the cues so that you can tell or even explain something adequately sometimes. It is an impediment. So I don't think that if we were all sitting around the table, that it would have taken nearly that long to get to the point with us gesticulating or using something in the room that we all had an orientation to, because that's a huge deal. We have separate orientations where we're sitting. So if we were all sitting around the table in the room, we could have pointed to the table and go, okay, let's say we're right here and you're saying we're going that way. And you'd be like, oh, no, you're going that way. It doesn't have to be a draw. It can be a gesticulation. But being that we're separate, we have different points of physical reference.
Yeah, true. I think that's very valid, but the thing is that's not an issue with Roll20. That's an issue with just not being present.
Yeah, remote gaming in general, which, I mean, again, if it wasn't our current situation, I live, 3.5 hours south of you guys. So regardless of the current situation out there, I mean, if I'm going to game with you guys in any reasonable fashion, I mean, we're going to have to look for an online tool similar to Roll20. I mean, I can't really complain. I mean, another thing I really like about it is being able to, when I've made games in the past, I mean, you guys maybe remember I've made a binder with some of the, pictures and things that I've come up with for the monsters or whatever, so that we're not leafing through a booklet. I do like the fact that I can reveal a page, like when you guys ran into ghouls for the first time. I was able to, reveal a page to show you what they looked like very quickly, very easily.
That was a really good picture of Jimmy.
Yeah. I mean, from a game master's point of view, doing it remotely, I don't know, and again, there's some of the tools I don't know how to use, and but for what I want to do, I mean, I can't really complain. For what I'm trying to present to you guys as a game master, I can't think of anything that's lacking, or maybe an easier way. But I think they've done a pretty good job with it overall.
So, okay, let's talk about, Steve, you just said you thought overall it's good. And Steve Mara and Jimmy have been relatively upfront in their dislike of parts of this, mainly the user interface, the way it's implemented. So let's talk about the bad. All right, let's talk about the negative, because I've cut those guys off a little bit on this up till now, and I think now is a good time to sort of delve into what they get wrong, what doesn't work. For me, I will say what doesn't work is the postage stamp video. Is that I get that there's a trade-off, that you want to show the map, but at the same time you want to show your players. But for me, role-playing is about playing with my friends and seeing my friends and interacting with my friends at some level. And while I understand what Steve is saying about the virtual is always different, I'll use that term instead of lesser, than the physical. And I don't disagree with that part of it. I will say that the minimization of the video makes it harder for me to feel connected to everybody. So I really don't like that part of it.
I'll agree with you 100%. That's a criticism that hadn't even occurred to me, because again, I'm not using a ton of visuals on the screen. It would be nice to have an option where we're looking, like right now we're all doing this meeting on Discord, and I think the video pictures of everyone that is good and big enough that I can really see everybody's expression, gestures, so on and so forth. And I think it would be neat to be able to maximize the video communication part of it, and then minimize, maybe say, hey, I got to show you guys something, and then, pull the video down to the bottom of the screen the way Roll20 does now. We look at the whiteboard, but if you think about it, the majority of our adventure, we're communicating, talking, sending ideas your way, asking for reactions, where you're absolutely right. That's just something that didn't occur to me until you just brought it up, but I'll definitely agree with that for sure.
Steve, you've got probably the most built-in criticism of user interfaces than anyone. And as I'm a user interface guy too, so we speak the same language. So where broadly speaking of the user interface, okay, I'm going to go ahead and highlight some things. I think there's inconsistent use of iconography.
Yes.
Things that we've taught people, this token means this icon means that. They just use in random ways. And there's functionality that I didn't know you could do until you start clicking around and doing things. And you go, oh, I didn't know that's what that was for. And that drives me nuts. Just drives me nuts.
I agree with that too. The interface is not consistent between sections. It does not seem to be very consistent. It's almost like, I did one part, and then Jimmy did another part, and Frank did another part, and everyone did their own little thing, and then got back together and said, "Oh, that's fine." And that's the way it feels to me. Is it was not one person did the interface, or it was someone that doesn't have a very consistent training in how to do interfaces. I'm not like great with I think Jimmy does really pretty nice interface stuff. My interface is very super functionality. It's not pretty.
Oh, just in case the listeners are wondering, most of the people on this podcast are computer programmers, in case they're wondering, while they're talking about designing iconography. So I'm not one, but most of the others are.
I'm not a programmer either. I left that world.
But you're a designer, so let's talk about the user interface. What the parts that bother you?
Yeah, if you just want to take the biggest example, the one that I think we think of immediately is the use of the hamburger. And I always hated that name for that icon, but you've come to understand that when you see the 3 horizontal thick or thin lines stacked on each other, that's going to bring up a submenu. That's going to bring up a little window with options. That's what that's for. That's on the little video windows, and that is to move them around. And so you're thinking you've got options for the video there, and you don't. And so there are little things like that would have been better served with a little compass or a little block or something, and that's a very simple fix. Things like that are super simple. You're just changing, a graphic. And I've noticed, especially seeing how businesses like, say, a major university, how they purchase software. It's oftentimes they purchase things and they don't think about the user interface in the way that their clients should. And so constantly they'll be buying products that have these quirks to their user interfaces and the way they use it that are not consistent across products. So you've got, 3 educational products that people have to use online, and they're all navigated slightly differently. So the companies, I'll go back to this. I think the companies that create these programs to fit a need often are, they're fans, they are people who know something about what they're building, and they're building it for a function, and they're not really putting as much emphasis on the user experience and keeping it consistent and making sure that it works right. Last night I did this 3-hour walkthrough with guy Andrew, who will come up occasionally in conversation, and he did it in Fantasy Grounds. And Fantasy Grounds is built on a very old, you're talking IRC days and things like that. So you're talking maybe it got its start, 20 plus years ago. And the way that it is set up also suffers from the same thing. There's this functionality weirdness where you're looking at things and you're thinking, my God, why is that the button that I press? Or why should I have to grab a window here? And I think these people would benefit from having, a dedicated team of user experience experts, but they don't have the money for that. I understand that.
Yeah, we'll circle back to one big positive. The biggest positive is that for the most part it's free, and so that's not nothing. I mean, a lot of critiques, you got to tempered by realizing that they're free and therefore you're not really paying for them. But
Absolutely.
Jimmy brought up a good point earlier, so let's bounce over to you on your critiques here, James, about there is premium versions that have functionality, but he's got frustrations with the interface. And to you, James.
So if we want to talk about the things I hate, I already talked about the drawing issue, so I won't go on about that too much more, but I am going to go on about it more because it sucks. So the problem is that when you select the drawing tools, the other guys don't use it, and when they do, it looks like a child who just got hit in the head, grabbed a crown, and is staggering around with it. When you go to select it, it always resets the collars. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong, but if I switch from shape to freehand, it resets the fill collar and the line collar. That is annoying as all get out. And then when you go to select it, sometimes it doesn't select the freehand. I'll be on the shape tool and it won't select the freehand. And then when I'm drawing it, it's just clumsy in every way that it works. I've used a lot of drawing programs over the years, and this by far is the worst implementation of drawing I've ever seen. And if we're in Steve-O's game, we're going to be using the drawing tools more than anything else because he doesn't like to spend time putting the maps up, and rightly so, because all of us are theater of the mind. We're not much into the dungeon crawl aspect of gaming. But when we need a map quickly, we need to have good drawing tools. It doesn't have those. I'm going to stop bitching about it now. So,
I will have to say I agree with you completely. In fact, I have stopped trying to draw anything on it just because it is so poorly done. And I've had issues when I've tried to do things, and I've only done it when we absolutely had to do when we're in the forest. And it was like, no, we are headed this way, right? And we are here, and the body was here. And that's the only time that I actually, tried using it again was because it was to verify where we were and what we were doing. So there was no confusion. But otherwise, I had the exact same issues. I'd selected on the tool, I'd selected on the color, and then I had the color selected and I went to something else. And when I came back and select on freehand, it didn't go to freehand. It started drawing a box. I'm like, no, I'm not on shape. I said freehand.
And as a player,
and it was just a little infuriating.
Right.
Thing.
And as a player, you don't have the ability to select a section of your drawing and move it back and forward, up and down the layers. Game Master, you do. Also, when you go to select a portion of your drawing, it's really clumsy in how it does that, and there's no way to fine tune that I'm aware of. So that's just a couple more critiques on that front.
Yeah, I mean, just on the drawing tool for me, I did create one map. You guys actually never got to. I freehanded a map. Unless I didn't find the proper tool, I found the fact that it just didn't have a simple eraser. I had to go up and choose white color and then a large brush in order to erase a line. It's hard to me. It was hard to, if I made a mistake or whatever, to erase it. And I may just not be using it correctly, but I think a nice big eraser button would be cool.
Yeah.
I will have to say really quick, the best way I can kind of relay the user interface of this is very much like ArcGIS.
Well, nobody knows what that means, other than like 12 people on the planet.
I know, but people that do know it will be like, oh yeah, it is the worst.
It actually reminds me of there was a paint program that used to be on Macs back in the 90s that I found frustrating, partially because it was a monochrome monitor and things like that. But I found that one to be a little frustrating to use, and it wasn't dissimilar than an early version of Paint in Windows. So I mean, it harkens back to 30-year-old methods of doing things that we've just evolved beyond, and there's no reason to keep doing it that way.
So we've got a good analogy for people. The 7 people use ArcGIS, and the over 70 crowd.
Yeah.
Ouch.
I'm just saying. Well.
And that's my biggest problem with the interface all in all, is I think that the way they've laid it out, the way they've thought about it, the way they've implemented it is based upon 2002. I mean, it looks very dated, and the way they've broken up the screen. I talked about the little video. It's kind of annoying, but you've got mostly white space, and then on the right-hand side, there's this panel that takes up a ton of space that is essentially this chat window thing, which is really important if you do a lot of chat window stuff. We don't. So it's kind of annoying that I can't reconfigure this desktop to better suit the game needs that we have. I also find things like the little sounds for the chat window to be annoying because I don't need to know it. It kind of takes me out of it, particularly if there's a whisper. Now, Steve is very bad about announcing when there's been a whisper. Who's getting a hold of me? Why are you bothering me about that?
Well, the problem is, well, the reason is because honestly, I have often have a lot of other things on the screen, like your character. We're not using the in-game character sheets. I'm using PDFs with your character sheets, and I put it on the right-hand side of the screen that covers that because I want to look at the other parts, and and then I'll look and it'll be like 30 minutes ago somebody's trying to send me a whisper. So,
hey, I want to stab Frank in
and
the
you
back.
have to admit,
Like
I mean, to me, it's like I'm trying to run the game for 5 people, and then somebody sends me a whisper. Okay, I got to stop everything and sit here and try and figure out the little whisper thing to send something back. I mean, everybody else is like, twiddling their thumbs, man. I mean, that's my thing about the whisper. I mean, I get it, and everybody wants to whisper to me at the same time, but it's hard as one individual to send back all these whispers and keep the game rolling, especially, again, the fact that it's remote makes it a little more difficult. I can't just jot a note and slide it to somebody, so, of course, that's part of it too, right?
Well, I think that they were trying to build a lot of functionality to allow for the process that works for you. And I agree with you. The whispering thing is a great theory that doesn't really work very well for our style of gaming. And again, I'm sure there are parties which they say, oh, that's the critical bit. I don't know how you could possibly game without it. That may be their feeling, but it doesn't work very well for us. And one of the things I find frustrating about the interface is I can't make it go away. I also don't like the fact that that's how you roll. You have to use Linux commands of /-pipe to whatever to do things in there. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I use Windows on purpose. I don't use Linux because I don't like all that command line crap. It's just not how I like to do things. And having to do that type of stuff is annoying. I'd rather have a button I can just hit roll a d20 and leave me alone.
Well, there is buttons for the
but
rolls.
it's not obvious necessarily. Like you have to kind of look around and go, and that's probably the biggest complaint I have about the interface. I have to stare at this thing for a while and go, okay, wait a minute, where's the thing that allows me to do the thing with the? I don't know. It's annoying.
Right. Yeah, I mean things could be done. I mean, I think the interface, if it was more modular, would work significantly better. So I could put like a dice roller, at the center of the thing or up in the top right corner or whatever. Have an area for your character sheet would be a nice little thing that you could always have there. I wouldn't mind having like everyone's their video screen down the left hand side, just straight up and down, and then I could have the map kind of in the middle or whatever Steve was displaying to us, whatever might be in that main window, and then have everything else around the side. So the way I do it now is I use the tiling ability in Windows to put the main Roll20 screen 2/3 of the left side, and the right third is my PDF character sheet. And that's worked quite well. It's worked, it's worked okay. I'm getting around. And then I have to kind of try and get it playing around with resizing it so I can still read my hard and extremely hard rolls or whatever they are, and then have everything in the left pane, the Roll20 pane visible that I need. But as I said, if we could have something a little bit more modular, I wouldn't have this, long, thin message thing that also has the rolling. I mean, I've been rolling with my own dice. I like, I think it's a little bit nicer. But sometimes if it wants to be something you want to like share with everyone what you're rolling, then you would like to have that. So I mean, a lot of this comes down to some things could be done better. I won't say it's horrible, I mean, I may have said that before, but it's not horrible, but it's kludgy. It's kind of, I'm getting better as we, each time we play it, I get better and better with it. I'm improving my, going, oh, that's right here and that's right there, and all that little beep was because someone rolled, not because half the time when we started off, I kept going, is that someone messaging me on? Is that Frank messaging me on Gmail, or was that my iPad beeping? I mean, I was constantly looking at other things, trying to figure out what the heck is going on. What is beeping? And it was just where Steve Marr had rolled, or something like that in the game in Roll20 interface.
It always goes back to me.
It is. It's all your fault.
It's always me. I'm not interested in the game. I'm rolling too much. It's fine.
So
I mean, that's the thing. That's just an issue.
So James, let's circle back to what you touched on earlier, and I derailed you from, which is the premium version stuff. Okay, and I think this teases at another issue I have with it, but. Let's talk a little bit about the premium stuff, because we have not used that in this game at all, because I don't think anyone's subscribed to it. We're just using the free stuff. Now, the premium things have a lot of functionality that maybe we could use, and you have subscribed to it in the past and messed around with it.
So I started on Roll20 in 2013. So it's been around a long time. And I left it for quite a while, and then when we started playing again, we picked it back up here, within the last couple months. Last month, maybe. And I could tell you there's not a lot that has changed in terms of functionality, and even the interface really hasn't changed since 2013. So I'm not really sure what they're doing, other than maybe improving the stability of the game. So you have three different subscription levels. You've got the free level, which is what we're using now, and that has all the functionality you really need to play. Where the limitation comes in is you only have 100 megabytes of free space available to you. So if you're going to make like 5 or 6 different games and run them, 100 megabytes is not nearly enough, particularly if you use it the way I use it and the way Steve-O uses it, where you have screenshots, some of which can get pretty large to use for your chapter headings. That could eat up that 100 megabytes pretty quickly. Then the second level you have is, I think it comes in at like $50, and with that level you get like 3 gigabytes of storage. I think they take the ads off, so you don't have any load screen ads, which who cares about that? You have shared table features. Gives you a little bit more control, I think, over some of the features across the tabletop. You get dynamic lighting, which is something I really like when you're doing dungeon crawls. I generally don't like dungeon crawls, but if you're going to do them, dynamic lighting is a must. And then it gives you, I think you get like, you can share your characters. So if you make a character sheet and tokens and stuff, you can share those between different games. Meaning if you create one game and launch it, you can create a second game and launch it instead of just messing around with the same game space. There's compendium sharing at the $50 level, and I think there's a thing for looking for group controls for that are accessed at that level. And then you have just a few more items available at the $100 subscription level, and that's I think it goes up from 3 gigabytes to 6 gigabytes of space that's available to you. And then they give you access to the API and the development server. And with those, this is really one interesting thing, particularly if you're a software engineer or somebody who likes to fiddle with that kind of stuff. You can build your own macros and expand the capabilities of the game using that open API. I messed around with it a little bit back in 2014 maybe, but I don't remember very much about it, other than it was pretty well done. So, yeah, you pay a little bit more money, you get a few more things that be beneficial. I think the $50 level is probably good for most people.
So one of my issues with this, and I don't really know there's any way to get around this, is that when you role play, the game master has to do the majority of the work That's just the nature of the beast. And one of the things they do is they write the story. They write the possible branching paths. They have to invent things on the fly. They have to do stuff depending on how the players mess around, how the rolls go. And then to get together all the supplemental information, all that stuff they have to do. And that's true whether or not you're a, in-face gaming or virtual gaming. All right. And I think that this tool set requires another step to take all that stuff and translate it into the virtual. And it's not super intuitive to me, as I've messed around with it at the game master level just a little bit. And I find it a little challenging to do some of those things. And obviously Steve hasn't tapped into all the full capabilities, and James has, and he talked a lot about, well, he could be doing this, he could be doing that, he could be doing the other thing. But, there is a lot of training you got to kind of do to learn a new piece of software to actualize a lot of those things. And I find that, I don't know if there's any way to avoid that with this type of stuff, but I do find it a little, I want to use the word cumbersome. I don't know. What do you think?
I thought I was able to jump into it quite quickly. I know, Jimmy, you know the game a whole lot better than I do, but it's doing what I want it to do. Unless you mentioned the dynamic lighting, but unless I pay for the premium, we're not going to have that, which I have no plans of subscribing to it. I see no reason to. I would definitely want to try something else, at least do a demo run of what is it, Fantasy Grounds, something like that. I would want to try a couple other ones before I committed to it. What are some of the tools that I'm not using that I should be, or in your opinion?
Oh, I don't know that there are any that you should be using. I would just be using I think you and I are different game masters, and I think you're using the tools that you would use the way you play. And I think it's perfectly fine. I don't have any complaints. Other than the drawing tools suck. But we went over that.
Well,
and I could go over that. I could bitch about that for days. But
I think one thing to remember is, especially, in some ways I feel like we're being a bit nitpicky. It is a free tool. And if you live remotely, or in our current situation, with social distancing and that sort of thing, and you're looking for something to get together as a group and role play and have some tools that you can share, drawing things. Maybe there's something else out there. I would certainly love to explore something else. And I know I'm getting ready to wrap up, chapter 1 of this Call of Cthulhu campaign, and I'm hoping one of you other guys have something planned so that I can play. I would be very interested in trying another system, role-playing system. But overall, I've been pretty happy with it. I agree the tools are clunky, but what do you do? It's free.
So
yeah.
let's branch away from that just a little bit. We can explore other ones, and I'm sure we'll do something like Fantasy Grounds, which Steve Marr's got a little bit of experience with, and we'll do an episode about that one, a deeper dive. But what do you think these things bring to the table that you couldn't do with something like Discord and screen sharing, for example? Or things like Zoom or Teams or whatever, where they have the ability to have a whiteboard that you can all share together. What do you think that these things provide that you couldn't get with that stuff? And we haven't explored that, so I'm springing that question on everybody, and I realize we haven't explored that, and maybe that's worth exploring at some point in the future.
I know that you're absolutely right. We haven't even tried using Discord. I haven't personally. I don't know if you guys have. I just know that it still feels like we have a common gathering ground when we're using this tool, and I know that I could use another piece of software, for instance, in the journal entries. It's when I want individual characters and not share with the entire group some type of picture, information, I can send that, and it's a journal entry which you have forever now that you can refer to later, that I haven't shared with the whole group. I know I could do that in other ways. I could just email you a PDF or whatever. But the fact that even despite the fact these tools are all clunky, they're all still within one system, And so when I get ready to work on the adventure, I can go in and upload all the things I want to use and preload the pages I want you to view during that night's adventure. And I'm not jumping all over the place. I'm not using the character sheets from the game. I mean, I am using that separately, keeping those on PDF. But, I mean, I still feel like it's a pretty nice gathering place where we all have this common piece of software we're using. And other than the fact that, yeah, the video screens would be nicer if they were larger. But without another experience to compare it to, I don't know. I like it okay. I think it suits its purpose.
So I have to say, from what I'm seeing, really what we've done so far with, I mean, this is the first we've actually long-term used any sort of thing like this to, role play remotely. Discord would probably do just fine for a majority of this. Though the only thing we're really kind of missing is having, a built-in dice roller. Though a few of us are kind of, adamant about using dice, real dice. Frank in particular. So from there, that's an issue there.
On Discord?
That Discord wouldn't
Discord
have.
does have it.
Oh, does it? Well, there you go. That's half of gone there. The other one is like a whiteboard kind of thing. I don't know if it has that
It's
or
got
not.
screen
like
sharing.
a drawing tool in Discord.
I
It's
think
screen-
yeah.
It's screen sharing, but I don't know if that's the same thing as a whiteboard. So I
Right.
can share what I'm seeing, but it doesn't give you the control to draw on it. I don't know.
The way
Teams,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teams does that. Zoom does that. So there are other tools that do that.
So so it sounds like Teams or Zoom might do that better then, because I can see where it would be worthwhile to have the ability to share, like a whiteboard space to be able to write on. And go, hey, are we going this way, or I want to go down this path, or whatever. I can see that being a bigger deal. But one thing I noticed that Steve did on this was he shared the journal entry thing was really kind of neat. I really like that. He had, my character had I was a private eye, and I had to go try and find a missing girl. And he had pictures, and I had a picture of a book, a number of other little journal entries and stuff that were very tailor-made for my character. And that was really cool. I really liked that. I liked that aspect of it. And I don't know if we could do that in Discord or Zoom or Teams or whatever. If we could, I'd be like, well, let's just move over to that.
We could do it,
instead.
but it would require, on my part, having to email each individual person a whole bunch of different stuff, and it would just be a lot less organized. So, I mean, the fact that I can go in and create the adventure with one piece of software and custom design these journal entries and things like that within one piece of software is, pretty nice from my point of view. It may not be necessarily from your point of view as a player, but
well, it's kind of nice that it is. It's connected on me. When I go on to Roll20, I can still go back and go, oh, there's that picture of that weird artifact I found, or anything like that, or here's that a map of whatever, or a scrap of paper I found that had something on it, and oh, that makes more sense now. I can go back and easily do that without having to go into my mail account and go okay, where did he send me that? Was that last week? Or, trying to figure out what day you sent me an attachment that had what I needed.
Yeah.
So, I could put that on my desktop and have it so I can bring it up and, everything that's involved with our Call of Cthulhu that Steve Hill is running, was the name of the folder, and throw all that in there. That would work okay, I guess. But it is nice for that. I do like the journal thing. I think that is pretty fantastic on it.
Okay.
So, let me ask you real quick, Jimmy, does the Discord or one of these other have a better drawing tools for their whiteboard?
I haven't used it much. Most of my experience with Discord is just walking in on Jack playing with his friends and asking him questions about it. He would have been a good person to have on here to talk specifically about Discord, because that's what he uses primarily. He doesn't use Roll20 most of the time. I guess he has
when
one.
When you first started saying that, I thought it was a very different thing when you walked in on Jack playing with his friends. Anyway.
So wrong.
Yeah, you phrased that like an awkward father. That was
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
You guys are terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm rolling dice, Dad. I'm rolling dice.
Come on, natural 20.
I caught him on Discord again.
No. There's
Critical success.
Oh my gosh. There's a lot to like about Roll20. To get back on track. Oh.
Okay, so
Wait a minute. You're saying to get back on track?
Yeah.
Hold on just a damn minute.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get back on track, as James said. I want to. We've gone pretty long on this, so I want to do this. Let's go through and name one thing that you do really like about Roll20. Now, John's already mentioned the journaling he rather likes, but he can name something else he wants.
Yeah. Actually, that's it. I think the journaling works pretty well, and I thought it was fantastic for the Call of Cthulhu for what we did. I don't know if it worked for everything else we might do, but for this, it was kind of fitting. I thought it was dead on. I thought it was really cool that Steve Hill was able to figure that out and get it and actually have a good use for it. So that's mine.
James.
Come to me last because I've got a list.
Oh, okay. Steve. Mara.
What I like best. Okay. I like the fact that it's free and anyone can get on and get going rather quickly, even if they have to struggle through the interface. I had a thought, though. I was going to say the video integration, but the video integration is problematic for me because of the limited space. So what I was thinking we might want to try is to not use the video or audio from Roll20, but to try Skype, because Skype does have that ability to have the floating video window, which actually is a little bit bigger for a single person than what Roll20 offers in the web interface, as a side note.
Steve Hill.
For me, I think that we can all gather into one common space digitally, and I can create either journal entries for people individually, or I can create big maps. Or I can just have a backdrop of a creature I want everyone to see momentarily. Again, I guess if I just had to put it simply, just one big digital gathering space that we've been using for a couple of months now that seems to be doing okay. And it's free.
James.
So I just want to briefly go over a couple things we probably didn't talk about, and then I'll name what I think is the best thing in Roll20. We didn't talk about the marketplace. So it has an integrated marketplace where you can purchase premium tokens, maps, different assets that you can use in your games. I've bought several different packs. They're really good quality, and I've used them in games, and I really enjoyed that aspect of Roll20. They also have modules, so if you don't want to spend a ton of time building out a game, you can buy a module that already has all the assets built out, different pages and scenes of the module already built out for you. So that jumpstarts you to a greater degree than if you're just coming in fresh with no assets or modules. I like that they have scheduling, so we can schedule a game and everybody can get an update on that. And then once you get there, you don't have to wait for the game master. You can go ahead and jump in the game and everybody can chat and catch up before you start your game. I think that's pretty cool. And I like the music, particularly when Steve-O does ambient music with Call of Cthulhu. I really like that. I enjoy music. I'm a musician. It really enhances the game for me. The thing I like most is the pages. So you can create new pages, and I look at pages as different scenes of the game. I talked about that earlier. I really like the way Steve-O uses it, where he brings up scenery of where our characters are at a particular point in the game. The visuals really help me get into the mood to play those particular scenes. So, and I like that both as a game master and as a player.
Actually, let me say really quick, I don't hate to interrupt you, but that is actually one really cool thing that we generally would not do if we were actually playing, live with each other. We wouldn't have those scenes, like a picture or anything else. And we've done that. I mean, I know we've had that maybe once or twice before in the past, but over 35 years, over 35 years of gaming, for me at least, was like 38 years, maybe 3 times. So, yeah, that's kind of a bigger deal. But I mean, I actually kind of like it. Like you said, it kind of draws me in as well. That's a really kind of a neat thing where we were in the forest. It was kind of spooky, and he put up this kind of dark forest kind of scene. Yeah, I think that's kind of cool. It kind of fits in there. So I'll let you get back to it. Sorry, I just wanted to.
I was pretty much done.
Add on to that.
I just like the pages. As a game master, I like to have those scenes set out independently, and when you start a new scene or chapter, bring that up, and it gets everybody in the mood, and then you just go into theater of the mind at that point. And then as a player, I enjoy it because it helps me get into the game when I see something that helps anchor me into that moment, because I'm a very easily distracted and hard to stay focused person, and that helps me out a lot.
What?
He says as he's doing a podcast and it looks like he's painting, I think.
Yeah,
while
or
we're
you're
doing
painting,
it.
I'm you know what I'm doing? I'm actually writing down the things I want to talk about, because when I start talking about things, I forget what I'm talking about as I'm talking about them. Or if I'm thinking, okay, I want to talk about the marketplace, I'll start talking, say 2 words, and forget what I was going to talk about. I think it's early onset Alzheimer's. It started when I was 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, you illustrated
Very
that
early.
point earlier whenever you asked what the question was again.
Yeah, it's just the way my mind works, baby.
Okay, so we've covered Roll20 quite a lot, and I didn't really mention my favorite thing because really there's a little bits in everything that people are talking about that I really enjoy. So I'm just going to go more broadly about these products. I think Roll20 was one of the first ones that did it.
No. You don't get off easy like that, my friend. You have to name one thing that you like. You make the rest of us do it, my friend. You do it.
Yeah, slap him down.
I already said you already named the things that I would say.
No. You name the one thing you like. If it's something that I like, that's cool. But name the one thing you like.
I like the fact that I could just mute all of you people. I just don't have to put up with it. I just don't.
Nice.
Well done. Point to Frank.
Okay, so if you have any thoughts about Roll20 or these virtual tabletops or anything like that, and there's maybe some aspect of Roll20 or these tabletops in general that we haven't covered that we should, or something we've missed, or something we just don't understand, please feel free to contact us at the contact information that's coming on later in the podcast.
And that was our show. Please visit us at roleplaygeeks.com for more info and links to social media. If you like the show, please rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions, comments, or if there is a topic you would like us to cover, you can reach us at roleplaygeeks at roleplaygeeks.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Type letters and then it says the thing that you type out.
Yes.
I'm sure that's
I'm
okay. So you
Jimmy.
just go, I'm Jimmy, and just submit that. There we go.
All right.
Welcome to Roleplay Geeks. This is Frank.
I'm your token hippie, John.
And this is Steve-O, a.k.a. the other Steve.
And this is Steve or Steven, the other Steve.
No, I'm the other Steve. You're the Steve. You're the
This
original
is Jim.
But I'm not the original Steve. I'm Big
Yes,
Steve.
you're the original Steve. I'm the other Steve. Come on, man.
Big Steve.
You're
and
cutting in on my
Steve-O.
action over here. You're cutting in on my Steve action.
Technically, the other Steve is Steve.
And I'm Jim.
Oh,
And
geez.
Steve is just Steve.
Okay.
I did. I got it.
call
I got
him
it out.
Jimmy Chuckles.
This is Jim.
What's
Jim.
Jim?
Jim?
Jim.
Jim. Jiminy. Jim.
so-
Jim.
How's that?